Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, where you are. This is Territories Talk for Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. I'm Shirley Osborne. I'm your host for this afternoon. My two co-hosts are Christopher Famous from Bermuda and Shayna Smith from the Virgin Islands, and they are not with me this afternoon. Chris is working behind the scenes today, and Shayna is off. But we are happy to be with you this afternoon. Let me acknowledge our partners, our media partners, where you can hear this and other Territories Talk episodes. Turks and Caicos Islands, Cayman Marl Road, Radio Turks and Caicos Islands, Cayman Marl Road, CBN in the British Virgin Islands, Channel 82 in Bermuda, CBC Channel 8 in Barbados, and ZJB Radio Montserrat. I'm in Montserrat. I'm broadcasting from Montserrat today. We are in the middle of a series that we're working on, Women in Leadership. And one of the interesting things that's happening is that there are quite a few elections going on in the Caribbean this year. Last year was, Time magazine had said last year was the year of elections because more than half of the world was having elections last year. One of the things I was looking at was how many women would win not just seats, but win leadership seats in government around the world. Sadly, last year did not bring much change. However, the year has started out pretty good in the Caribbean, I must say. Anguilla got her first woman premier. We are happy about that. Because one of the things that we are clear about is that women's voices are important. One of the reasons why we do these episodes on Territories Talk is because we feel that women's voices are important. Women's voices are necessary. And because we are all in development mode here in the Caribbean, we're also very clear that the best direction for development must involve women front and center. Women have always been very much involved in the background. But we also recognize that it is time that women were also allowed to do work out in front. And this afternoon, I'm going to talk with a woman who has been working on that. She's working in politics in the Caribbean. You're going to hear from her in a little bit. And she's going to tell us, I'm going to ask her questions about politics in general, women in politics and government, and obviously about why she's involved in politics, but her commitment to government and politics in the Caribbean, the direction of it. So we welcome this afternoon. We're happy to have you all here. If you listen to this after the 16th, we're happy that you're finding us anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to introduce to you Maureen Webber. She's from Jamaica, and she's our guest this afternoon. She is the one who's going to talk to us about politics and government and women in office and all those things.
Hi.
There you go. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you.
Maureen Webber, ladies and gentlemen, from Jamaica. This Territories Talk is coming out of the overseas territories, the British overseas territories. We are not independent. We are not on our way to independence either, on the surface at least. And we're definitely not on the way to republicanhood. So one of the things I want to ask you about also is what's going on in Jamaica. But begin, please, by telling us about you. We're very interested in, because women in politics, like I just said, women have always worked behind the scenes very, very, very much. Women in office, little by little, we're seeing more of them, but women organizing politics, perhaps not so much. So tell us who you are and how you got to here, in brief, and then we can go into some detail.
Okay, so name already known, branded accordingly. I consider myself a political strategist and ground organizer for politics. That's part of it. I came to this sort of like in a roundabout way. In my high school period, I was an activist. And during that particular period, Michael Manley, who was the leader of the party I supported, was sort of bringing all these new things and social change and transformation. I thought, so one way to get these things to happen would be through having the best possible people as leaders. It was not just anybody, but have the best possible people as leaders. But even then, I didn't think about politics as a way of doing things. I started doing sort of in another way by working on development issues, microfinance, dealing with youth at risk, youth in conflict with the law, housing and housing, urban development, urban renewal project, those kind of things. So I started really career-wise. I started there, but committed to the issue of inclusion, and that coming through economic empowerment, social empowerment. So that's where I started, and it was a lot motivated by, obviously, clearly by your parents, always sort of shape you. But then for me, the politics of 1970s in Jamaica was like a starting point for me. That's my starting point.
Yeah. Well, what must it have been for you? Since we just tell us very brief what it must have meant, because Jamaica in the 70s was a kind of turbulent time.
I guess it's well, you know something. Sometimes it gets to be disruptive for you to have changes, and so I don't use the word turbulent. And we started off on a path where it was clear that we were in a country that had achieved political independence, but we didn't have social equity and we didn't have economic independence. So changes had to happen, and when changes have to happen, you're going to have persons who will feel no. All right, but the gains that we made out of that period are so significant to the country today. For women like myself, I mean, you know, with Michael Manley, things like equal pay for women became a thing. Ending the law that said because you're born out of wedlock, you're not entitled to the same things. You're a bastard. That was a part of what he achieved. Issue of giving women maternity leave with pay. So a lot of things that were, I mean, I'm just focusing on the ones that are about women. So that was revolutionary even then. So turbulent, yeah, but turbulent because of change. It was a disruptive period. You have to disrupt things sometimes to get the things to happen that you won't happen differently. You have to be brave to do those things.
Yes, you have to be really brave. Right now, Jamaica is moving towards full republicanhood. Just earlier this year, or late last year, they tabled a bill to remove the British monarch as head of the government, head of the country. How do Jamaicans feel about that generally?
I think that right now, I guess honestly, it is while it's a thing to do, given where we are in terms of our economics and our social and the quality of life, it's not like at the top of the list of things to do. It's and then also there are things. What are you focusing on? The Labour Republic, or what is different about my quality of life or about the economics? Let's focus on something else. Of course, it is something that we have to discuss, and it's time for us to end that relationship. But we need to take the time to have those conversations and to include people in the process. And it's not just ending. What does it look like after, and why, and who does it serve best? There's a lot of questions around how it's been done now. Like, what's the rush? We've come this far. Let's work it through with John and Jane Public and take it from there.
So let's move a little bit, still a little bit in Jamaica, but we're moving into development conversations. Jamaica, some years ago, published a document in which for the cultural policy for Jamaica, the Jamaica is the cultural superstate. I'm going to ask you about how other islands in the Caribbean, since your political strategy, you work around the Caribbean with politicians. If this is, because I've been looking also for other documents like that, and I personally think that every state needs to have one. Every state does not have one. So I want to ask you, what are the drivers of development that you see in some of the islands that you worked in that give you sort of, let me say, the confidence that there is a real clear idea of where the country wants to go, like Jamaica has?
Well, first of all, I do not know if, I mean, you talk about in the cultural space or in general, because I do not know, even in the cultural space, I don't think we have a clear sense of where we are to go. And part of that driving thing, the primary thing as part of why I focus on campaigns and having people elected, is that it has to be the mindset of those who are leading. They have to really be attuned to the public, first of all, because they are serving them, but also they have to have a vision, not about themselves, as I'm a minister or I'm an MP, but have the drive and say, this is the focus. We're on a path to development. One of our biggest challenges, I think, in the region is that we have a cycle for elections, and that's okay. But I think because we tend to be so divided sometimes, we end up not thinking, that was a good thing, let's carry that one forward. or if I drop something that I came in and I saw, it's because of the fact that it's a different government. So I think the maturity to say this is working, carry on with it, or to say you're not carrying it forward, not because it's not yours, but because it's not good for the country. We don't have that, and we're still searching for the right kind of leaders who will come in and they will say, yeah, those two things that you are doing are good. Those two things were not going to be good for the people, and people understand that. So that's a part of what I think is important that we focus on. Because that's our biggest challenge, and I mean, it's about the fact that you're there to serve people and you're there about the development of the country and a real vision. I mean, sometimes you do a manifesto, you do a platform, and you say, I want to do these wonderful things. And we get down to the wire, you get into office, and you forget the agenda. Now, the other part of the equation is that we as the public, we have to be able to say, hello, please, knock on your door and say, you're supposed to do this and you haven't done this, and to hold them accountable. I think the best way and the way we have now as voters is to vote them out the next time. But in the meantime, we're going through this cycle of, I would almost call it a different type of underdevelopment. It's like a cycle this way, as opposed to going up, line up, up like that.
Okay. Now, before we go a little further, I want you to tell us a little bit more about yourself, because we get that in secondary school you got some clarity on where you wanted to go, and you work with Mr. Manley, the Prime Minister Manley, the inspiration and so on from there. And in terms of development, you've also worked in microfinance, because you mentioned economic empowerment. There's no economic empowerment without unless you can earn your own money. In the Caribbean, we still are very much limited, very much constricted in access to finance particularly for micro businesses. So tell us a little bit about that journey, about your work in that.
Well, again, I have to say, those people back to I say Comrade Manley, because that's my language, but Michael Manley, because I started off working post university in housing, in urban renewal, working in inner city communities. I started off there, worked for the USAID for a while on the same issues across the Caribbean. And then I sort of came to office of the Prime Minister, and one of the things that he was this, I call it like his second coming, post the 70s period, but he still had a passion for economic empowerment, for inclusion, for social justice. They were still on his list of things to do, despite the constraints of things like an IMF. And one of the things he thought about was access to finance for small and micro businesses. He had that. And then we started a pilot project. And then he said, you know something, let's go big with this. And so a team of us developed what was called the Micro Investment Development Agency at the time. And it was actually seeded to start lending to lenders for microfinance. So that was the start. And then I left OPM and I went to work for a private sector company and brought the microfinance kind of BE thing into my headspace and convinced them to take it as a part of their portfolio. And even then I continued on that particular journey. Microfinance became something that I felt this was the way to go. This is the way to get access to it. Because the issue, for example, for small business was collateral. And so actually removing that and focusing on a person's credit worthiness and trusting that and lending to the business idea, not to the fact that the person has a stove, a fridge, and a car. Because if you had all those things to begin with, you probably need to borrow the money. And so I started and just kept on growing. Then I started running programs for the entire Caribbean around microfinance. And that culminated, I think, about 10 years ago, or less than 10 years ago, but I was named Caribbean Microfinance Practitioner for the Caribbean, actually. So but to me, it's a part of that economic empowerment, if done right. I mean, some places now we've moved to the point where the interest rates are way too high, the onerous on small businesses. So I am concerned about that. So I still believe the concept of funding small businesses is key, but not through a mechanism which charges you significant amounts per week, but you end up in debt, and your business is collapsing.
Yeah. Right now in Montserrat, we're having some conversation about that. Today I was talking with some people. And Montserrat is working on what we're calling food security, and therefore finding ways to support farmers in feeding us. And there's a lot of talk right now because the Premier has allotted money in the last budget for agriculture, and we're finding that they're going to be loans rather than grants. And considering Montserrat's level of development, people are having some questions about that. How do you see it going? I mean, just sort of in general now, after all the work you've done all these years, have we progressed? Do you think
I don't
even?
think so. I think we have to be more creative. There's that sort of tension between loans and grants,
Mhm.
because you don't have unending amounts of money, and if you give it away, then you don't have it for the next tier of person who
Yeah.
may want it. So that's a part of the thing. Sometimes it may be money that a person that they might need, but maybe the other things, the other kinds of support, the technical support, the opportunities, and maybe a sort of a combination of loan and grant, or just more creative ways to finance, particularly in the area of agriculture, where you have to deal with the fact that we don't have really any proper crop insurance policies in the region. So it means that I borrow the money and rain come, volcano or hurricane is all over, and I have no insurance and I owe the money. So it has to be
Mhm.
that you look at the entire package. What is the current ecosystem that supports a smaller business or a micro business, whether it's a farmer or it's a person producing for tourism sector, and then get that right, get that mix right.
Yeah. One of the other things that's really important to you, before we come to the politics, one of the other things that's really important to you in your work is people with disabilities. Tell us how you came by that, and what you see. I mean, are we taking care of our people with disabilities in the Caribbean,
Ah,
do you think?
so we're going to stop and start by saying, why are we saying, are we taken care of? We don't need to be taken care of. We just need to have our share at the table. And so I came to this again because I have a son who is now 32 with severe um, intellectual disabilities. So Brian is nonverbal, doesn't process the spoken word, has some physical challenges, etc., sensory issues big time. So he's pretty much dependent for self care on myself or other persons. Okay, so I technically consider myself to be a part of the community because I live that every day. And no, we're not making any progress. So I mean, we make little tiny, tiny things, and it's hard and look nice. But to me, if we don't get the fact that we don't need to be taken care of, for example, I want access to education. Because when I have education and I have that opportunity, I am closer to the fact that I can get a job. Now, 80% of the people with disabilities don't get past um, primary school. We don't, our unemployment is 2 or 3 times higher than that for the national levels. No, we're not saying that. Something like 70% of us are unemployed, and the rest of us are underemployed and are exploited in some sort of different kinds of ways. So it has to be about the fact that policies and legislation, yes, also the mindset of the government to move from a one thing here, one thing there to appease us. And because we're so used to getting so little, anything good thing okay, we can I get excited about. But I'm a very greedy person when it comes to this. I want you to give me what I'm entitled to, not what you're
Mhm.
giving me as a token. 15% of the population throughout the region have disabilities. Now understand that, and understand the fact that for most of us in the region, our population pyramid is bulging. It means fewer people down here, and this little bulge in the middle here is going to get up here and bigger, like a hammerhead thing. And all those persons, they're going to have a range of needs around disabilities. They're going to need ramps to get on the thing. They're going to need more buses, access so they can move around because they still want to live a regular life. We're going to need better healthcare systems. I mean, now we don't have healthcare systems that really concept with disabilities. You're going to lose your hearing as you get older. You're going to lose your sight or less have low sight. So while it's a disability agenda, think about it beyond just that. Think about if our education system actually catered for a person who learn differently. A lot of children who are in school who people say are failing because our education system has failed to realize that they also have some sort of disability. So it's, to me, it's a big picture thing, not just like a token thing here and a token grant here. It's about changing how we actually deal with all people in the society.
And
But
how
yeah,
do we feel? I mean, have we progressed in how we feel about disabilities? Because there's a people tend to either avoid it altogether or overload, and
yeah,
then there's
empathy,
stigma
sympathy.
about. I mean, just the other day I was speaking to a friend of mine in Barbados about children and having children assessed in schools for disabilities or for learning and growth disabilities. And one of the things she was coming up against was parents not wanting my child to be labeled.
Because you see, because we have the whole issue of public education, because we have so much stigmatized disability. There are parents who don't want even to think. So they, what they do, they push a child through some sort of a school. They still quote unquote fail and end up not able to be included in other things economically and so. because of the stigma, because the public education is not there, and also because if my child is assessed and considered to be X, where does he or she go? Because immediately those schools just throw you out or put you into some warehouse special needs school over there. Although you could perhaps learn if you had additional tools inside the traditional classroom. So
Yeah.
I can understand it. The stigma thing is a big thing. I mean, I remember the first time way back I was doing a radio program, and before the TV program, he says to me, "Oh, you're talking about your children. I have two children. One has a disability, one is so on and so forth." And when we were getting ready to start the interview on the TV now, he turned and he asked, leaned over to me and says, "Do you want me to ask about both your children?" I looked at him, took off the little black something, and walked out. Later for that, I'm not going to deal with even that attitude. If I have two children, I have two children. Why are you asking me that question? So that means that a person is not a person. So that is the reality of how when you do the census, some people don't want to say in the census that I have a person with disability because they're afraid of how it will look. So what
Yeah.
happens then in the census? You're not counted. So you can't get the government to realize that you're a part of the system and you need solutions. People don't realize they're actually hurting yourself by avoiding those questions in a census, for example.
Yeah. And nowadays, there's a lot of talk about autism, and people actually joke about being on the spectrum. It's a thing, because I sometimes have difficulty with the word disability, and I know America, for example, America is a land where they use euphemisms a lot. So they talk about differently abled.
No, don't
That's not
stop.
the euphemisms that I'm not quite sure I feel about it.
Well, in our community, there's a convention. In a convention, it's very clear. We're
Yes.
persons with disabilities. We're not apologizing for that. And people who
Yeah.
are uncomfortable with that look for things like differently able or special needs. Every child has special needs. I have two children, they have special needs. So therefore you can't. That's a label. The disability is not the issue, I always explain that the disability comes from two things, right? The barriers. So I have an impairment, right? But then there's a barrier. And those two together equal my disability. So if I have
Yes.
access to education, even though I have an impairment, if I have you remove the barrier, which is institutional, and I have access to education, then I'm moving forward in my life for the most part. So it is a barrier that creates that thing. This impairment barrier equal disability. And so the thing is to remove those barriers, institutional, attitudinal, and environmental.
Yeah, that's the disability. And how do we remove the attitudinal? I mean, that probably is the more difficult one, because you can legislate away a number of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the attitudinal one, that one's
Well,
generally very.
that's public education, public awareness, our ability and willingness to speak about our reality, and saying, hey, I mean, like as I said, I'm going somewhere, Brian. I take him. He's out with me. We've traveled as far as Australia together, and this is a child who doesn't use a toilet on his own, or the place he's with me. I don't have an issue. I couldn't. I mean, it's his mother. I mean, I'm his mother. But it's people accepting, and it's a barrier you have to break down, because there are laws in some of our countries already there. But a minister may not think about it more than say, oh, I have a school over there, man, for them to go to. So in that minister's mind, he or she is thinking that they have done enough for us, because they've given us a school to warehouse our child in and keep him or her separate.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of it is just not hiding them, just not,
Yeah, but you see, it's like a mixed, because I remember being in a pharmacy and Brian stepped back on somebody, and the man says, "You should keep people like him at home." And I looked at him and I thought, you should be the one at home.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I stood in line. So you have to have, it's like a courage, You have to have that. I'm out there. I'm entitled. It's a part of my space. So it's educating our parents to understand that you ain't done nothing wrong. They're the ones who will enjoy their problems. But it has to be a deliberate thing, because it's so embedded in us to treat them so differently that people look for little labels, little things, give us a little token, give me a gift basket at Christmas time. Nah, I want to earn my own money. So
Yeah.
that's me on disability. As you
Yeah,
can
I like
see,
I like what you just said. That you have to do it on purpose. You have to be intentional. So I want to use that to bridge, get back to the politics, because being intentional, we need to be very clear and intentional about how we manage our people with or without disabilities, male or female, age differences and so on. because we are working to get somewhere. As you do your work around the Caribbean, do you get the idea, do you get the notion that we are generally very clear about where we want to go? Not necessarily details, but who we want to be, and therefore can be intentional about the decisions that we make?
I think that individuals sometimes, but then when a system sort of like, when a system, when a government gets elected, right? Unless there almost has to be a minister of intention, like a conscience minister, who he or she said, "Hey, remember, not we're promised to do this, or we decided on doing this," because people get into their portfolios, get into their zones, don't even always see the joyousness of things. So it has a bit. So for my part, I'm as careful as I can be with who I would want to work with to help them get elected. It's not going to be perfect. For example, working with Coro in Anguilla, when we're both connected by someone who knew both of us, she is not what we would call in our language, and Chris will say this, a sister party. Because I predominantly work with progressive parties, labeled progressive parties. I've never really worked with a party that is not a sister party or in that umbrella. The AUF is basically not in that umbrella.
Yeah.
So I was kind of, but then it's good to have been my first female head of that I've been working with. She had just been elected as a leader of the party. She would have had to go through all those things. I said, okay. So we started cautiously and doing small things and small things. That's my core. That's a night of the victory, right? It was one of the best victories I had.
Nice. We're glad you got that. Believe me.
Huh?
We're glad you got that. I am really happy about that. I met Cora some years ago, and I'm really happy about this.
And that was it. Like with time, I realized that I also learned from this campaign so many things, that the label progressive and the behavior are necessarily the same. Because you look for them, they're listed as conservative or right of center or something like that. But her herself, she is a progressive and inclusive person. And then as I began to see the people she was carefully assembling to run on the ticket with her, I could see that they had a passion. And I thought, okay, this is really something. And as we started building out the platform for the party and getting people's ideas of what they saw, it was definitely something that you felt. I really invested in that particular campaign. In terms of time and everything, I invested in it. And really was really pleased with the outcome. Really pleased with the outcome.
Yeah. Very pleasing.
So part of it really has to be about picking. Like for example, in this case when Kitts and Nevis, I felt that, one of the things I must tell you is that when an election is over and people are in office, I tend to focus a lot on reminding them a part of the agenda without disability.
Okay.
My work in the Caribbean started through Common Patterson. Can go back one.
Patterson, yeah.
Because PJ actually recommended me to Fred Mitchell and then Perry Christie, who was the prime minister and head of the PLP in the Bahamas. So I went over there, and that was the beginning of my working outside of Jamaica and treating it as a part of my career path. So I've been working in Bahamas with the same party for the last, from 2007, for example, and getting ready for an election next year as well. So I have a lot to thank him for.
All right. Let me just take a moment here to remind people that you're listening to Territories Talk, and we are speaking with Maureen Webber, a political strategist, and a number of other amazing things from Jamaica. And you can catch Territories Talk on ZGB Radio Montserrat, which is where I'm recording from, Radio Turks and Caicos Islands, Cayman Marl Road, CBN in the Virgin Islands, in the US and British Virgin Islands, Channel 82 in Bermuda, and CBC Channel 8 in Barbados. So let me ask you, Maureen, is our politics in the Caribbean generally progressive? And if not, what might some of the reasons be, do you think?
I think the current batch of political leaders across the region actually are more of progressive parties than they are not. It doesn't mean by having the label that you end up rolling out the most progressive policies. I also think that a lot of it is, even before what is now happening, that a lot of what you think you want to do when you get there, you figure you can't do it, or the political oomph to do it is not there. Of course, there are the constraints of when you get in there, you find that the economy is here or there. But honestly, I mean, I look at for example, what PM Drew is doing in St. Kitts and Nevis. I mean, the health sector is really, really moving to different levels. There is modernizing our sector, where people used to fly out for everything, fly out to do MRI, fly out to do this, and he's putting those things in place, which are important. Beginning to look seriously at the education system, working on disability policy, which they've asked me to help them on, for example. So it also is about us keeping them honest. But I think that for the most part, the leadership of the countries are the constraints they face and the lack of a minister of intention to remind them that is that really aligned? Because you just suddenly just start doing something,
Yeah.
You want to do something, you start doing it, and you don't realize, whoa. What did I promise again? What did I commit to? In other words, you must have your little cheese or your things up on top there, and you must say, is this a lie what I said I would do? It's like when if you're a Christian, you say, is this something am I behaving in my Christ mode or in my earth mode, so to speak? So in the same way, here are the things that I've committed to. Is it aligned? Always ask yourself, is it aligned? And be honest about it. I don't mean a cabinet retreat where you celebrate all the goals you built, but a retreat into yourself and always looking at what you promised people. Because people voted for you to deliver a better quality of life. They didn't vote for you because they figure, well, I mean, because in the past, people always had this, I'm always PNP, I'm always PLP. And people had like 2 terms, 3 terms of office. If you look in the region, I mean, look at Bahamas, it's 1 term, don't like you, another person, another term. This year, for example, the first we've had so many incumbents who've actually retained state, like in TCI, Bermuda, they have retained in Belize as well. The PUP went back into office. So it's the first time you had so many incumbents who are back in office. So they're going for a second term. But people vote for you for a reason. Answer to them, share with them, ask them, have the courage. Not an election day. What am I missing?
Yeah. I want to ask you two questions. One is, in fact, in terms of this turnover, because when I was with the government here, one of my offices was with the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and literally every single meeting I went, there was a turnover. People were being voted in and out of office, and here in Montserrat, one of the things that we're hearing, the people saying, no, you let them elect them for another term before they barely begun the first term. Give them time. We're also finding that but the question has to be, if they're not clear about what they're supposed to be doing, they're not doing what they said they would do, how much time do you give? So how is this for you? And like you said, you work in Bahamas since 2007, but in other places you work. How is it for your work as a strategist? Because obviously you want your candidate party to be successful every time.
Oh,
How do you balance that between that and sort of whether they're doing the work or not?
Well, I mean, I really don't work with a political party that I think really doesn't have a commitment to people. So even and I also have a relationship, because I've been working or interacting with Cora for a year and a half, almost 2 years actually, before election. So it wasn't just like it just came up and then somebody says, here's a job, come and do it. So I'm not like that, just come and say, well, I want you to come and do something for me. It's a relationship I've had with you and a confidence I have with you, that my beliefs and my position and how I stand about things to do with women, small businesses, the environment, of course, is important for me, and also, of course, the disability agenda. So it's a relationship and it's a trust that you will be true. And by the way, I do check up on them. I do say hello, please.
I want to ask you that, yeah.
No, I'm bad about that. I'm really bad. They get annoyed with me. They figure, I'm not saying that I'm going to come into the studio, or I'm going to ask Chris, because the light is coming in at me like this now. It was before. How do I do that, Chris? Can I shift without disrupting everything?
Chris?
I sent him a message already. Do I come into the studio and I move? I can shift. So he says I can shift. He's given permission to shift. He's given permission to shift. So forgive me, please.
Yeah, that's fine. So we're talking with Maureen Webber, like I said. And one of the questions I want to ask her about is the balance between urgent needs and intention. Because of course, as she said, you heard us say earlier, we have restrictions, we have limitations. One of them is economic. One also is resources, because our resources go off, our human resources go off to America and England and Canada and Dubai and wherever. Our best minds go to work in other parts of the world, ostensibly because there are better opportunities for a certain kind of success. I want to ask her about how politicians in the region work with that. I was just saying, Maureen, I don't know if you heard me while you're talking. I was talking about the one of the things I want to ask you is about, we want to be intentional and we want to be planning ahead, planning for, centuries ahead. I mean, just the other day, I don't know if you heard when Mr. Trump, there's a back and forth between America and China about the tariffs, and the Chinese foreign responsible said that China is planning for, we're working for 5,000. We've been here for 5,000 years, and we are working 5,000 years ahead. We are planning for the next 5,000 years. China has, they have 1.5 billion people almost. They have a strong manufacturing and economic sector. They've been doing all kinds of work to build up. In the Caribbean, we are restricted both in terms of our size, and because our people go off to other lands, our best minds have quote unquote better opportunities overseas. So it's kind of hard to balance being intentional and being clear about where you want to go, and having at the same time not having the resources and having to pay so much attention to the basic needs.
Okay. I think, again, a part of intention, why you're running for office, you want to serve it, run your country. It's not something that you're forced or you're pushed into. Mm-hmm. You said you wanted to do it. So come in ready to do the job. That's how I feel, first of all. And if you promise to do 3 things, right, you must know they're going to take you 4 years or 5 years to do it. Don't commit to doing something insane that's going to take you 10 years. Because you're holding them to ransom by saying, mm-hmm. Oh, guess what? It's really 10 years. What can you do in 4 years? Use the 4 years in office. What can you achieve? So don't put on these whole long, exciting things you're going to do. But we keep on talking about this word food security. No, we need to talk about the fact that we're going to reduce our insecurity, but we're not going to be able to get to food security. It's just not possible. So don't say food security. Say we want to reduce our dependence on, and then it becomes a doable and manageable and something that I can measure. Mm-hmm. I can now say, instead of importing 10 pounds of onions, we're going to move to import 7 pounds of onions. And then you put in place the strategies and the tactics to get to that particular point. So when you start the over-promising thing, and then you say to yourself, my first 100 days in office, I want to do this. My first year, why is it that a government is not going to function like everybody else, like a corporation? Why don't they have smart goals? So that this is it, it's measurable, it's attainable, I can evaluate it, because there's no E on SMART goal, by the way. It's a SMART T goals. Mm-hmm. The E is for evaluation. So you're going along with things. So why don't you do that? Why are you thinking that this is the biggest job? It's the biggest corporation in any single country. It employs the most people in any corporation in any other countries in the region. So therefore, treat it like a business. It's a business. Treat it like something where you have to demonstrate success and demonstrate results. Deal with and do your risk analysis. Do all those things so you know what are the things, and then come to people when if there's a problem. Not pretend and play around with it and everything, because people have lost. One of the things that I'm looking at is I'm looking at how people are the reduction in the voter turnout, because for mm-hmm. me now that's a concern. And why is the VTO? Why is the turnout dropping and dropping? Imagine in Jamaica, 37% of the people voted for government. 37%. All right. Remember then, the country have almost 3 million people, and we have 37% of the people who are on the list voted for the government. Moving from 60, we were 70, then 60, then 52, 37%. So there has to be a concern in all the countries I've worked in. I've seen a reduction in voter turnout. Sometimes that's like 5%, sometimes 10%, or as drastic as it was in Jamaica. Why? Because people have lost confidence in politicians to deliver. And they do it by doing things like either over-promising or just going up on a frolic of their own and do their own thing and forget why they're there.
Yeah. One of the things
cycle.
Yeah. One of the things that I find myself, a lot of politicians don't make the switch from, to my mind, there's campaign and then there's administration. So you campaign, there's campaign mode. And then once you won the election, then there's a shift that has to happen So you go into administration, and I find people find it
Ah,
difficult to
of
balance
course.
that.
Well, first of all, let me tell you this as a campaigner, you're
Hmm.
always in campaign mode. Let me just
Yes.
say that.
Hmm.
Because if you're delivering, it's campaign. It
Hmm.
makes my job harder if you come and come back next time.
Yeah.
Because if you promise to do 10 things and you're doing them, you're responding to your commitments, and therefore you are technically campaigning. And
Hmm.
don't look for a miracle now in year 4 to turn everything around and start giving out little houses here and there. That's nonsense, because people no longer stupid. They want you to be true to what you have said.
Hmm.
You know,
So let's
anytime. Go ahead. You go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, let's talk about campaign. What when you how you because I love politics, but I love campaign season.
Oh,
People get into, they call it what, a silly season. People get into all kinds of things in campaign, and I especially love campaign season in the Caribbean because we have some conversations. People go off on some tangents, and just makes your head spin. How do you navigate that with your people in different islands, in different populations? Is it different? And if so, how do you
it's
how do you
pretty much
manage
how
that?
it's you know. Remember, I think of myself more of a technocrat and a field operation person.
Hmm.
So I focus. I don't get involved in a silly season approach. My
Uh-huh.
mission is to be sure that the candidates, the campaign teams are ready, that the workers or the volunteers are prepared to execute the work of field work all the way to the election day and to bring out their voters. So that is it for me. I mean, of course, I'm concerned about what I call the air war and making
Hmm.
sure the air war is relevant to the ground game. Because if I don't have air cover, my troops on the ground get wiped out, just like that. But for me, it's really about focusing on getting teams ready to get the election. They're putting systems in place, ensuring that people know what they're supposed to do. Campaign managers are clear about what they need to do, build their capacity if necessary, develop tools for training workers, checking on things in the field, and people understand how. So that's what I really do in a campaign, and I project and may use numbers and data to determine what we need to win, how we do, how far we are. So that's what I really do. So I'm not a platform speaker at
No,
all.
no, no, no.
I'm never on a platform, not because I don't want to be. Okay, there I was somebody from St. Kitts,
Yeah.
but I mean, but let me tell you, I totally love a campaign. I like the energy of being in the field, first of all,
Yes.
with party workers, moving them from thinking, can I really do this? It's like another kind of development activity. Can I really do this? I can really do this in a comrade. I never did this before, And saying, yes, you can. I'm watching them get all excited about it. I like hear them talk about how they will present themselves and the candidate, watching them
Hmm.
transform as well. So it's a kind of development activity. But that it just gives me energies all the way
Yeah.
through.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Um, so so when you are working with a new candidate, right? How do you, because one of the things that I we let me just go back a little bit. The Commonwealth Parliamentary Association spent a lot of time thinking about how to
Yeah,
prepare.
well, mhm.
Where is this picture?
This is in Jamaica when Chris, Kyle from
I see him. Hmm.
TCI, um, Kingston from Bahamas, Alula Samba, Jamaica. So we had a whole continuance of Caribbean territory people here for our conference. It was
Uh-huh.
2022, right? And we went out for dinner. So that
Yeah.
was that.
Yeah. Yeah, the CPS spends a lot of time thinking about how to prepare candidates, how to get them into the mindset that we're talking about here. You're going in to do a job, you're going in to do work that needs to have results. Um, but then you go in, and politics is tough. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to go in politics when I was a child. Since I was a child, my father kept saying, no, 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 it's dirty business, it's tough, it's rough. Is there, and a lot of people stay away from running for office because of that. A lot of people stay away from voting also because of that. Yeah. um and so I wonder how you, when you talk to your party people, the people you work with, what are the conversations you have about that?
I think, well, first of all, how you connect with voters, and how you carry and how you not carry a message as I want to do this for you or this for you, but
Hmm.
how you listen to what they want and then take that to the point of saying, okay, this is how we're going to work together. I think that's one of the important things. people do not trust politicians for the most part throughout our region. And that's just the cynicism is unreal. And it's something that we're going to have to be deliberate, again, intentional, it has to be intentional about working on. But for the candidates, of course, I just said, come from inside of you. We have this basic, why am I doing this? And if you can't say that in a sentence or two, how will I make a difference? I mean, I do ask people, in my case, when I'm speaking to, when I don't have new clients, I realize people have been working with for like 10, 15 years now. But I always want to know, what is your commitment to people and to the development agenda of your country? What do you understand are their needs? Are you listening to them? I go to those things and I show the importance and how difference it makes. I, for my part, I'm interested in my own party here in Jamaica. When I go to workers and I'm saying to them, okay, let's get ready for a workshop on how to canvas, how to do something, I say, comrades, here's why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I believe that this party will listen to and act on a deliberate policy and program for inclusion of persons with disabilities. So when I leave my son and come out here into St. Elizabeth, where I was today or wherever it is, it's because of that. That's my agenda. And so I feel, and so therefore they say, oh, well, I'm giving up something, but I know it's for something that is worth it. So if you don't have an agenda, that is, you don't have a purpose for doing this, then it's going to be difficult for you as a candidate. Or even a canvasser, because the canvasser does not believe in his or her candidate, they can't go and ask for that vote. They have to say that this is a really good person. This is somebody that I believe in. I've seen him or her do something. So when a voter starts asking you 10,000 questions about the person, and you have I think, well, he's PMP or he's PLP, that ain't enough anymore. So you as a candidate have to exude I'm doing this for the right kind of reasons. And both your workers have to believe in it and be able to carry that message. So I focus a lot on that conversation. Yes.
Okay, one of the things I want to ask about, obviously, is women in public office, women in politics. Every time I look at a picture of the CARICOM leaders of government, I shake my head. And I heard Mia Motley said the other day, Prime Minister Motley said the other day in Barbados Parliament, she made a comment about to do with America and the Cuban medical team. Yeah, and she said she's working with her Caribbean brothers, colleague brothers. And then she said, I wish I could say ancestors.
Yeah, I remember that statement. I remember that comment.
Yeah. How are we looking? First of all,
there was a thing that I remember writing long ago. You need a wife. And I'm not saying it from a gender or sexuality point of view. In effect, women in politics need a partner who does the things that women do when men are in politics.
Yeah.
But understands, because first of all, the meetings are called at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? Or I go out and technically because my son is dependent on me. So if I go into the field, one morning I was getting in here like 1 o'clock in the morning, right? It meant that I have to have somebody else who stays with him. But just think about that. Young woman or who's married, has a child, wants to be in politics, is torn between that. Because people say, how do you do it all? You don't really do it all, really. All right? Because something does give eventually.
It has to.
In politics. There's no pretending about it. There is something that you're going to miss or drop the ball at some point in time. And we have to it's unfortunate, but it is true. It's the kindness of so as a beginning, first of all. And I always then go on to say, women do not have the network or the net worth.
Yeah.
Because it takes money to run a campaign. And if you don't have the network, you didn't have a Old Boys Club, you weren't in a lodge, those kind of things, it means that you have less resources to finance your campaign. You don't have the kind of network of people who have money or leverage money. And it's not something that we have been very good at building ourselves, because again, we have to be intentional about it, because our nature is to look to some man to say, that's success, and I want to get there. All right. I mean, what I do in the region now is difficult for me as a woman, because you get there and people sort of want you not to speak, or you kind of have to squeeze in your suggestion, or you have to really have a leader who believes in you. Whereas if I was a man, I mean, some of my male counterparts walk in and demand their thousands of dollars and do something. So me, no, I am there Like if I'm up in the morning at 4 and I'm finishing up in the evening at 12 o'clock in the field, because I have to prove myself. Honestly, I do. And this is after doing campaigns. Oh, that was a small campaign. It wasn't a big campaign. I mean, to me, one of my hardest campaigns was working in Anguilla, and it's 11,500 voters.
Mm-hmm.
But being the campaign director meant that I had multiple things I had to manage. Some people I had known for the last year because I've worked with them and building capacity and so. But managing different people, different situations, it was challenging that kind of way. But I couldn't drop any ball. I couldn't drop anything. All
Yeah.
right, and I couldn't appear to be unable to do things because I'm a woman. But I still want to be a woman. I don't want to act like I'm one of the guys. No, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I was a child and my father was running for office, my mother did a lot of the groundwork,
Mm-hmm.
made sure, drafted the speeches, made sure they were correct. She was wardrobe person, she was critiqued. We used to get carted to all of the meetings because she had to go to listen and then come back and they talk about stuff. So women have always done that. And so I find
Behind
it
the scenes, behind the
behind the
scenes,
scenes, yeah.
and that is
But
really our challenge.
yeah, and we don't want to be behind the scenes anymore. I mean, a
No,
friend of
I'm
mine,
not going to be behind the scenes. I'm not.
uh,
I know for me, I said I put in my time. I think I know what I do know. I know what I do not know also. And I think
yeah,
we just have to just step out there like that, And also, and then we need to support each other. I started working with Cora. It wasn't a sister party. I know that famous. I always started to jibe about it when I just started. But I
yeah,
said, this is a female candidate, it's a female political leader. And she's starting off in that space, although she had a seed. This is a
hmm,
space, and this is where we were 2 years ago. No one would have thought we could have come here. So when they
yeah,
even called the election, they thought that we weren't ready, and we were ready
yeah, yeah,
from the morning after they called it. But I put in the time because I felt I would want to know that I was a part of this journey to have somebody who I think has the passion and the compassion. Okay, that's a workshop in Bahamas. Okay, have the compassion to do the things that need to be done.
yeah. And so I wonder how it is that our societies, I must say, men, our societies accept that women do this wonderful work in the background. But when women present themselves for public office, they're always these there's always this serious push, and it's not just Montserrat, it's not just the Caribbean, obviously. I mean, even the United States. I remember, and not so long ago, when Hillary Clinton was running, I remember they did the CNN, I think it was in a beauty salon in DC, I think it must have been, and the women said they like Hillary Clinton and they think she's really good, but in 2016, it was 2015, 2016, women were saying, but I don't think she's supposed to be, the president is supposed to be a man. He's not supposed to be a woman. I heard people say in private conversations, I heard people say that in this last election here.
Mhm.
But when I tell people, um, women make up a good solid 50% of our populations. Women bring all these complementary skills and talents. Women are good at a number of things. Why then do we continue to have this issue with women in power?
Just a panic and a fear because it's a panic. I think always a panic. But we started. We as women started. The very fact that 51% of the population or the voter list, for example, here in Jamaica is women, tells me that we're in the majority.
Mhm.
Right? But we ourselves started. We don't stand by and we listen to what some women say and we of course make what men say. Yeah man, she could have something. I hear it all the time as it relates to me. And I hear it. No man, Maureen can do this morning because I'm a very systematic person. I like order and things. So the men say let her take the minutes of the meeting. Like those kind of things. I remember walking into a meeting way back when I started in housing, and Minister Spalding at the time walked into the room, and I was there. I was just myself, and Nadine Isaac was an architect, non architect. I was new to the housing department, and Spalding says to the CEO, "I told you I don't want a secretary in the room. This is a confidential meeting." So everybody's looking around and wondering. We don't see
Who's the
anybody.
secretary?
We're
Uh-huh.
talking about me now. Me with my masters in planning, talking about you. Me, my talk about. All right. So I'm just making the point is that the perception right away is that we have certain roles that we play. And we sometimes, I wouldn't say we dumb ourselves down, we just settle for that because we just don't want to conflict. Because once I speak, for example, oh, Maureen, aggressive Maureen. And I used to let that rile me up and I would not say anything. Then I decided that man speaks, he's assertive. Woman speaks, she's aggressive.
Yeah.
But I just let the aggressive label just roll off my back now. Because I decided on that because otherwise I would not speak because I would be intimidated by the label that people are trying to put on me. It happens to women. So you don't
Yeah.
want the label because you feel kind of uncomfortable because you're aggressive. You want to be a nice person,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. Here, Montserrat, they tell me, Shirley, you think you're a man. No, I
yeah,
don't
man.
think you're a man. I'm just a
No.
competent woman. What's your problem? But last night I was talking to some young people in Trinidad, young girls, young women, interested in politics and voting and so on. And one of the speakers was from St. Vincent, and she was talking about running for office and having to redesign herself, having to pull back and not be too much of something and hold back herself in order to be accepted and to win a seat. What do we say to young girls? Do we tell them that you have to hide yourself, you have to pretend not to be so? How do we get that? How do we get past that to get women into office in the Caribbean?
Well, first of all, if you're doing that, you may get in, but you won't be able to stay in. And being authentic is really, people really are looking for authentic. I think because we have doubted ourselves, we present ourselves as uncomfortable with leading because we're not so sure. But those women who are sure and comfortable about it, they present. I mean, I look at Marsha who ran in St. Kitts and Nevis for a seat that was a battleground seat for us and won it comfortably. She had a nice slogan, running in heels, by the way. I kind of like that slogan.
Yes.
Really nice slogan.
Well, let me just say, in 2019, I ran for office. Everybody, Montserrat, everybody in my life knows that I am a shoeholic. And we did this thing.
We're connected. We're connected. We are connected.
So we did this thing about shoes. We did this little game about shoes, and some people thought that we were trivializing politics. Because they think it's also not supposed to be fun.
Yes. Well, I always tell everybody, if you're doing anything, and I'm when I walk into the room, I say, bring your 3 E's: energy, excitement, enthusiasm. Come
Yeah.
to have a good time. If I'm going to do a whole day workshop with you, and you come in here and you're going to enjoy yourself, then it's all over.
Yeah.
If we make politics and we make it a little bit lighter, and not as intense and make it so negative, then people will gravitate back into that space. But right now, this battleground of nastiness and back in the forth type of thing. And therefore, people just don't want to be a part of that. Life is already hard, I just don't want any negative around me too as well. I'm just thinking as a voter,
Yeah.
So
we're running out of time, actually. Let me just
okay. Yes.
It's a really good conversation. Let me just ask you one last thing, though. It's about this. Is it that we take ourselves our politicians take themselves too seriously? Take the issues, some of them take issues not seriously enough. We don't allow for personality and I don't just mean this as far as women are concerned, because a lot of the nastiness that comes out of politics is, to my mind, a lot of it is they take not the issue, they take themselves too seriously.
No,
And then
not so seriously. They're pompous. Not
Yeah.
seriously. They're pompous and figure they know everything already. And they trivialize things sometimes. And I'm saying they in a generic way. When you see them failing and floundering, they have gone to the point where they figure they know everything already. So they stop this. That's why people vote you out.
Yeah.
The moment you get arrogant and pompous, people vote you out. Because they don't want, I put you there, I can take you out. And that's how the Caribbean voter is today. More and more. And I think campaigns are becoming more and more aggressive and more because they realize that they have the power to remove you. Or if to remove you, take it from 20 seats to 15 seats. You may still be in office, but you're going to be them in a large, smaller majority. So there you go. It was an
One last question, Chris. One last question. The issue of Caribbean unity for me is a big deal, really important. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we do Territories Talk, because we feel we need to all be connected all the time. You talked about sister parties and so on. Where are we with that, do you think? Looking at politics in the Caribbean, are we any closer to being close, or?
Something, I think that what is happening now and the decisions that are being made in the US, I mean, it's people might think it is awful and so, but I think there's almost like the time come for us to realize we need to be connected with each other more. I think PM Motley said it as well too.
Yes.
But actually the time has come for us to realize that all of us think we are something and we all gravitate toward the US space rather than talk about food security, are we doing food security insecurity? But to find some way of dealing with it from within, moving our goods and services around within our own region to support each other. So the time, the space is right for us, and also for our return to a South-South dialogue like we had before in the 70s. The time has come for that.
Yes. All right. Thank you so very much. This has been Maureen Webber from Jamaica, political strategist, activist for disabilities, and a woman who is in politics, a woman who thinks politics is important and ought to be done well. And she does her work. Part of her work is supporting politicians in doing politics well. This has been Territories Talk. Thank you all very much for participating. Let me thank our media partners once again. Let me thank Radio Montserrat, which is where I am transmitting from, not the studio today, but Radio Montserrat, Radio Turks and Caicos Islands, Cayman Mall Road, CBN Radio 90.9 in Bermuda, Channel 82, Radio Sabre, I forgot, PJFE 93.9, CBC Channel 8 in Barbados. Thank you all very much for listening. Thank you, Maureen, and all the very best.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome.